Get ready to be on board for a quick rundown through arcade gaming history as we explore 20 games that absolutely smashed through the boundaries of technology in their heyday. These arcade marvels weren't just about chasing high scores, they were trailblazers in flaunting state-of-the-art graphics and pushing hardware limits to the max. From heart-pounding light gun shooters to action-packed fighting games, each title on this list made a splash in the gaming world and raised the bar for what arcade gaming could accomplish. Let's get straight into today's fun new episode. Let's get started.
Dragon's Lair, the fantasy adventure where you become a valiant knight on a quest to rescue the fair princess from the clutches of an evil dragon. You control the...
Dragon's Lair. Dragon's Lair is a game that's a total nostalgia bomb that pushed the limits back in '83. You know how most games then were all about blocky sprites, but Dragon's Lair, it was like playing a freaking cartoon, thanks to its laserdisc tech. You're Dirk the Daring, this badass knight, trying to save Princess Daphne from a dragon named Singe, who's holed up in a wizard's creepy castle. The gameplay's wild because it's all about quick reflexes. You're not just moving Dirk around, you're reacting to these prompts that pop up, which decide if you succeed or totally flub up the scene. Picture this, you're running through the castle, and suddenly you need to dodge a fireball or leap over a trap. Hit the right button at the right time, and you're good. Mess it up, and it's a hilariously dramatic death scene for Dirk. And man, the graphics were insane for that time. Instead of choppy pixels, you got smooth animated Don Bluth magic. Yeah, the Disney guy. But there's a catch. Since it was running off a laserdisc, the game could lag while it loaded the next scene, which was kind of frustrating. Fast forward to Dragon's Lair 2, Time Warp. This game drops in '91 with even better graphics, but kinda feels old school because games were getting more interactive by then. Still, it's got charm with its time-traveling antics and crisp animations. So yeah, it was like the granddaddy of those quick time event games you see today, and it's a classic for a reason. Star Wars. Star Wars totally revolutionized the arcade scene with its 3D color vector graphics, pulling you straight into the iconic assault on the Death Star from the original 1977 film. You get to play as Luke Skywalker, manning an X-Wing in a first-person rail shooter setup. It's like you're right there in the movie. The gameplay is divided into 3 intense parts. First up, you're in space duking it out with TIE fighters. You've got this yoke control with buttons on it, letting you blast lasers from your X-Wing at those pesky fighters. Your main goal here isn't just to destroy them all, but to survive their attacks for a certain period. Next, you skim the surface of the Death Star, dodging or destroying artillery bunkers, and later, laser turrets on towers. It feels pretty high stakes since you're trying to keep your shields up while taking these bad boys down. The final showdown? The Trench Run. Here, you've got to dodge obstacles and fire a proton torpedo into the exhaust port to blow the Death Star to bits. Succeed and you feel like a total hero. Mess up, and it's back to the start of the trench for another run. Daytona USA. Let me break down the hype around Daytona USA for you, and why this is such a hit for the arcade. This game is a killer arcade racing game from Sega, dropped back in '94, and it's all about the NASCAR vibe. Players get to zoom around in stock cars on one of 3 epic tracks. It was the debut game for Sega's Model 2 arcade system, and man, did it show off what that tech could do. The gameplay's pretty darn fine and also super engaging. You're in the driver's seat of the Hornet, starting at the back of the pack and racing up against up to 39 AI cars. The goal? Blast past these guys and finish the race before you run out of time. You've got checkpoints that extend your time, so it keeps the pressure on. The tracks range from the easy-peasy 3-7 Speedway to the trickier Dinosaur Canyon and the beastly Seaside Street Galaxy. Graphically, this game was a beast for its time, pumping out these smooth texture map polygons that made other games look dated. Multiplayer was a hit too, especially with link cabinets where you could race head-to-head against your buddies. But what makes Daytona such a standout is its real-feel driving mechanics. You can drift and slide around corners like a pro. Plus, the steering wheel in the arcade setup has this force feedback feature, so every bump and crash feels legit. You even get an H-shifter for that manual gear shift vibe. Virtua Fighter. Next up, we have Virtua Fighter, which is this groundbreaking arcade game from Sega that totally rocked the arcade world back in '93. It's the OG of 3D fighting games, making a huge splash with its polygonal graphics, like it was the first of its kind to bring characters to life in full 3D. Plot-wise, the game sets up a global fighting tournament where these fighters are throwing down to prove who's the ultimate warrior. But there's this shadowy syndicate pulling strings behind the scenes, adding a layer of intrigue to the mix. The gameplay's super slick too. You step into the shoes of one of 8 characters, each with their own unique martial arts style. You've got folks like Akira Yuki throwing down with Baji-Quan, or Pai Chai showcasing Mizon-Quan. You battle it out in a series of matches, aiming to knock out your opponent or push them out of the ring. Each match is a best-of-3 scenario, and if the clock runs out, the fighter with the most health wins. You've got 3 basic controls: punch, kick, and guard, but mixing these up can unleash a whole array of moves, making each fight feel dynamic and intense. Virtua Fighter not only pushed the envelope in terms of graphics and gameplay, but also set the stage for future 3D fighters. It's not just about brawling, it's about strategy and mastering the moves. And let's not forget the combat system. It was deep. Like, really deep. From basic punches to crazy combos, there was always something new to learn, and of course, it pushed the hardware capabilities too. It was tough, but man, was it satisfying when you pulled off those killer moves. Killer Instinct. Coming in hot is Killer Instinct for you, which is this epic 2.5D fighter that hit the arcades back in '94, developed by Rare and put out by Nintendo. The game's all about this massive tournament organized by a mega corporation called Ultratech. They're not just bringing in regular fighters, they've got experimental creatures and even a monster from another dimension, all clashing to see who's the ultimate champ. Now, onto the gameplay, which is where Killer Instinct really stands out. Unlike typical fighters where you win by knocking out your opponent in a couple of rounds, here, each player has 2 life bars stacked up. You win by completely draining your opponent's bars. This setup makes each match intense right from the get-go, because there's no reset after a knockout. The game throws in some dope features like auto doubles and combo breakers. Auto doubles lets you execute complex combos with simpler button inputs, keeping the action fast and furious. Combo breakers are crucial. They let you interrupt your opponent's combos. Plus, the game has special finishing moves that can range from making your opponent dance humiliatingly to dishing out a massive string of hits. Graphically, it was a showstopper with its pre-rendered CGI characters and dynamic backgrounds. It pushed the limits of what arcade hardware could do back then, making it a favorite for its visual elements and smooth combat. If you were into arcades in the 90s, this game was the go-to for high-octane fighting action. Space Harrier. Space Harrier takes you on a wild ride of an arcade game from Sega that dropped in 1985. It's a third-person rail shooter that swapped its initial military jet concept for a jet-propelled human zipping through a fantastical world. The shift to a fantasy setting let them really go wild with the visuals and gameplay due to technical and memory constraints. The gameplay is all about speed and reaction. You control the Harrier, who's jetting across surreal landscapes filled with vibrant colors and trippy checkboard grounds. Enemies range from prehistoric beasts to robots and floating geometric shapes. You need to blast these foes while dodging their attacks and static obstacles like trees or pillars. The game's intense, the continuous flow of stages where you need to stay sharp to survive. Honestly, a deluxe arcade cabinet really set it apart. A cockpit-style motion simulator that moved with your actions, adding a whole new level of immersion. Each stage culminates in a boss fight, adding a tough challenge before you can progress. Plus, there are bonus stages where you ride an invincible dragon named Uriah, smashing through obstacles for extra points. How fun is that? The control setup includes an analog flight stick that makes the movement feel fluid and dynamic, enhancing the whole flying experience. This game made you feel like you were part of this wild, high-speed chase through a sci-fi landscape which totally rocked the hardware limits for its time. Totally ahead of its era, Space Harrier became a classic for its groundbreaking graphics tech. Afterburner. Afterburner is a classic rail shooter arcade game by Sega that hit the scene in 1987. This game puts you in the cockpit of an American F-14 Tomcat jet, throwing you into some intense aerial dogfights across 18 unique stages. The goal? Blast away a swarm of incoming enemies using your machine gun and a precious stock of heat-seeking missiles. Gameplay-wise, Afterburner is all about speed and precision. You control the jet through a third-person perspective, which feels super dynamic thanks to the Sega X board's ability to handle complex sprite and surface rotations. This makes every dive, climb, and sharp turn feel incredibly real. Plus, the arcade experience is next level. You could play in a hydraulic motion simulator cabinet that mimics the movement of an actual jet cockpit, tilting, rolling, and rotating in sync with the on-screen action. It's like you're actually piloting a jet. The game's design was heavily influenced by the high-octane vibe of the 1986 movie Top Gun. You know, fast jets, high stakes, and that military flair. Yu Suzuki, the mind behind this, wanted to capture that same rush and excitement, blending it with cutting-edge arcade technology. It also features a variety of cabinet styles, including a deluxe version that moves around, and even a commander cabinet in Japan that adds extra immersion. Whether you're gunning down enemy planes or dodging incoming fire, Afterburner delivers a pulse-pounding experience that pushed the limits of what arcade games could do back in the day. Truly a milestone in gaming history.
Get ready.
Outrun. Outrun is an absolute classic in the arcade racing scene. Launched by Sega in 1986, this game was a game-changer with its top-notch hardware and graphics, non-linear gameplay, and a killer soundtrack by Hiroshi Kawaguchi. Imagine that you're cruising in a Ferrari Testarossa convertible, dodging traffic and racing against the clock to hit one of 5 exotic destinations. The gameplay is so neat. You're behind the wheel from a third-person rear view, tackling curves, hills, and dips that obscure upcoming obstacles. You've got to manage your speed and maneuver skillfully to avoid crashing. The innovative part? You get to pick your music through an in-game radio, adding a personal touch to each race. The goal here is to explore through multiple stages with branching paths, offering a unique experience each playthrough, and reach one of the various endings, which could see your car either breaking down or you receiving a trophy for your efforts. Yu Suzuki, the genius behind the game, drew inspiration from a road trip across Europe, capturing the essence of thrilling drives along scenic routes like the French Riviera and the Swiss Alps. Arcade-wise, Outrun was a smash hit. It featured several cabinet styles, including a deluxe motion simulator that literally moved with the game's action, making you feel like you were really tearing down those roads. It topped charts worldwide and became the highest-grossing arcade game of 1987. It wasn't just a fun game, it influenced the entire racing genre and even contributed to the arcade industry's recovery during the 80s, so you totally get the hype.
Johnny Cage.
Mortal Kombat 2. Mortal Kombat 2 is known for its detailed digitalized sprites and increased graphical fidelity over its predecessor. This insane arcade fighter that Midway dropped in '93 seriously cracked up everything that made the original Mortal Kombat cool. The game picks up right where the first one left off, with the baddie Shang Tsung surviving and persuading his overlord Shao Kahn to host another tournament in Outworld. This time, Earthrealm's heroes are fighting on Shao Kahn's turf, making everything way more intense. The gameplay in MK2 is a huge step up. They added a ton of new moves and fatalities, including the now infamous babalities and friendships, making it a blast to beat down your friends and then turn them into a baby or dance with them. The combat's faster, the graphics are sharper, and there's a whole roster of now iconic characters like Katana, Melina, and Kung Lao. And dude, the stages are epic. Ever uppercut someone into a pit of spikes? Classic MK2 style. The arcade reception was off the charts as well. I mean, it was a phenomenon. It nailed the charts as one of the highest-grossing arcade games when it dropped, sparked major controversy with its graphic content, and influenced a slew of other games. Everyone was either playing it, talking about it, or banning it, but it really showcased the graphical superiority with breathtaking visuals and sound effects. Plus, it set the stage for countless sequels and spin-offs, cementing its place as one of the most influential fighters ever. If you were in an arcade in the 90s, you were probably dropping coins into MK2. Tekken. Next up, we have another famous title, Tekken. This one's a fighting game that really shook things up when it hit arcades back in '94. Developed by Namco. This game's where the whole Tekken series started, which you probably know has become a massive deal in the fighting game community. So here's the deal on the plot. It's all about Kazuya Mishima, who's got a pretty intense family drama going on. When he was just 5, his dad, Heihachi Mishima, chucked him off a mountain to test if he was tough enough to take over the family business, the Mishima Zaibatsu. Kazuya survived, thanks to making a dark pact with a force called Devil, which gave him mad strength. Fast forward 21 years, Heihachi throws the King of Iron Fist tournament to find the best fighter out there, and Kazuya steps in to show he's got what it takes, eventually throwing down with his old man in a climactic battle and chucking him off the same cliff as his own rite of passage. Talk about payback. Coming to the gameplay now. Tekken broke new ground by letting players control each limb of the fighter separately, making for some seriously strategic fighting. You pick from one of 8 characters, each with their own moves and combos, and battle it out in various locations like Angkor Wat and Venice. The game uses a 3D background with 2D gameplay. Now, the arcade reception was great too. Critics and players loved the innovative control scheme and the deep character-driven plot. It was a hit, paving the way for many sequels, and it's often remembered as one of the games that defined fighters in the 90s. The tech, the graphics, everything just fell in the right place. the House of the Dead. Think of yourself back in '96, stepping into the arcade with that familiar buzz of excitement in the air. But this time, there's something different, something groundbreaking. Sega spared no expense in creating a spine-chilling atmosphere in the House of the Dead that instantly drew you in from the moment you laid eyes on it. Armed with your trusty light gun, you're thrown into the thick of it, battling hordes of zombies unleashed by the deranged Dr. Curian. The controls were smooth and responsive, allowing you to take precise shots as you dodged incoming attacks. And reloading? It was a stroke of genius. Just shoot off screen to reload your pistol. It was intuitive, immersive, and added a layer of realism to the experience. The graphics were next level, thanks to the cutting-edge Sega Model 2 arcade hardware. They managed to squeeze every ounce of power out of that machine to deliver detailed environments, creepy undead creatures, and jaw-dropping special effects. But what really set it apart was its branching paths and multiple endings. Your choices mattered, affecting the outcome of the game and adding to the replay value. And speaking of replay value, the difficulty ramps up with each round, keeping you coming back for more. It's no wonder it's remembered as a classic that helped popularize zombie games and left an indelible mark on the gaming industry. NFL Blitz. NFL Blitz revolutionized the football gaming scene when it burst onto the arcade scene in '97. Instead of the typical simulation-style gameplay seen in titles like Madden NFL, Blitz opted for a wild, exaggerated take on the sport. Picture NBA Jam slam dunks, but with pigskins flying and bone-crunching tackles. In Blitz, rules were more like suggestions. With 7 players per team instead of the usual 11, the field was crowded with versatility. Wide receivers could turn into quarterbacks, and defense was a mix of rushers and interceptors. Pass interference? Allowed. Late hits? Encouraged. It was a free-for-all of gridiron mayhem. But Blitz didn't just push the boundaries of football gameplay, it pushed the hardware too. With its detailed and exaggerated animations, it demanded more from arcade cabinets and home consoles alike. Players could pull off jaw-dropping moves like German suplexes and elbow drops, all in pixel-perfect glory. And let's not forget the graphics. For its time and for the arcade, Blitz was a visual hit, with impressive technological advancements that left players wide-eyed. As the series evolved, so did its impact. From losing the NFL license to relaunches and acquisitions, Blitz maintained its reputation for over-the-top fun, and while the NFL may have toned down some of the madness, the Blitz spirit lives on, reminding us that sometimes the best games are the ones that break all the rules. Dance Dance Revolution. Back in '99, Konami dropped this bombshell on the gaming world called Dance Dance Revolution. You're basically stepping onto a dance platform, surrounded by flashing lights and pounding beats, ready to bust a move like never before. It's a dancey dance game, so not much to explore in the plot, but here's the lowdown. Arrows scroll up the screen, and you gotta stomp on the corresponding ones on the dance pad. Easy, right? Well, not exactly. The rhythm gets faster, the arrows get trickier, and suddenly you're in a dance-off like no other. Plus, there are different arrow types to keep you on your toes, from freeze arrows that you gotta hold down to shock arrows that'll zap you if you step on them. Now, let's talk tech. With its snazzy visuals and lightning-fast gameplay, it demanded top-notch hardware to keep up. Imagine the strain on those arcade machines, keeping track of every step and beat with split-second precision. And the home consoles? They had to work overtime to match the arcade experience, with Konami's in-house artists pumping out original tracks that sounded just as good at home as they did in the arcade. This one really pushed the boundaries and got us all off the couch and onto the dance floor.
3, 2, 1,
Ridge Racer. Buckle up, because we're going into the adrenaline-fueled world of Ridge Racer. This racing game series from Bandai Namco Entertainment has been tearing up the track since '93, starting with its arcade debut on the Namco System 22 hardware. In Ridge Racer, it's all about the thrill of the race. You're behind the wheel, gunning it against computer-controlled rivals to cross that finish line first. But here's the deal. Drifting is a way of life. You gotta master those hairpin turns and power slides to keep your speed up and leave the competition in the dust. When Ridge Racer hit the arcade scene, it was like nothing gamers had seen before. The graphics were top-notch, the gameplay was smooth, and the soundtrack pure ear candy. It was a showcase of what arcade hardware could do, pushing past its capabilities with its catchy visuals and fast-paced action that kept us hooked. With each new installment, the series pushed the boundaries even further, from customizable cars to multiplayer mayhem. And let's not forget the innovative arcade setups, like Ridge Racer Full Scale with its replica UNOS Roadster cockpit and Ridge Racer 3 Screen Edition for that super immersive racing experience.
USA.
Cruisin USA. Cruising back to '94, when arcade racing was all the rage, Cruisin USA hit the scene, taking players on an adventure-filled ride across the good old US of A. Developed by Eugene Jarvis's TV Games Inc. and published by Midway, this game was the start of something big, from San Francisco's Golden Gate Park to the streets of Washington, D.C. It's a coast-to-coast thrill ride. Dodge traffic, weave through construction zones, and gun it to first place where the timer runs out. And get this, you can even change the tunes on the fly, keeping the adrenaline pumping with your favorite jams. Now, here's where things get interesting. Cruisin USA was branded as the debut of the Ultra 64 platform, a collab between Midway and Nintendo. Sure, it was based on Midway's V-Unit arcade hardware, but it set the stage for what was to come. With its flashy graphics and thrilling action, it pushed arcade hardware to its limits, drawing crowds and quarters like nobody's business. And let's not forget about the home port. While it didn't quite hit the mark with critics, it still sold like hotcakes, especially when it hit the Wii's Virtual Console. Talk about making a comeback. So, whether you're reliving the glory days in the arcade or tearing up the digital highways at home, Cruisin USA is a classic that'll always have a place in gaming history. Sega Rally Championship. Alright, let's rev up our engines and explore deep into Sega Rally Championship, the ultimate racing game from '94 that changed the game forever. Developed by Sega AM3 and hitting the arcade scene like a whirlwind, this game was a total game changer. In the game, you'd be tearing through 3 epic stages, from the African savanna to the rugged terrain of Corsica. But here's the take. Your position in one stage carries over to the next. It's a high-stakes race to the finish, where every move counts. And with 3 awesome cars to choose from, each with its own handling style, you've got the power to dominate the track. Sega Rally Championship wasn't just another racing game, it was a revolution in the genre. Using the cutting-edge Sega Model 2 board, it simulated driving on different surfaces with mind-blowing realism. From gravel to asphalt, every surface felt unique, with the car's handling changing accordingly. It was a milestone in racing game history, setting the bar sky-high for future titles. But it didn't stop there. It inspired a whole generation of rally racing games, from Colin McRae Rally to Initial D Arcade Stage. And with its unforgettable soundtrack by Takanobu Mitsuyoshi, it became a legend in its own right. Honestly, a timeless classic that holds a special place in our hearts. Virtua Cup. Alright, buckle up for this next one because we're going into the world of Virtua Cup. Think of it this way. You're a badass detective ready to take down a notorious crime syndicate named Evil Inc. But when your partner gets taken out, it's up to you and your trusty sidekick to bring justice to the streets. Speaking of the gameplay, you're thrown into the action in a first-person perspective, armed with a light gun. Your mission is simple. You got to take down criminals, avoid shooting civilians, and survive against all odds. But here's the kicker. Enemies react differently depending on where you shoot them. It's all about precision and quick reflexes as you blast your way through the gritty underworld. Virtua Cop was a total game changer back in '94. It was one of the first arcade games to use real-time 3D polygon graphics with texture mapping. Sega was way ahead of the curve, advertising it as the world's first texture-mapped polygon action game. Plus, it lets you shoot through glass. Talk about mind-blowing. Despite some skepticism at first, Virtua Cop blew critics away with its cutting-edge attractive graphics, realistic animations, and addictive gameplay. It set the stage for future shooter games, inspiring classics like Time Crisis and The House of the Dead. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 – New Age of Heroes. Now let's check out Marvel vs. Capcom 2 – New Age of Heroes. In this game, you've got characters from both Capcom's video game franchises and Marvel Comics going head-to-head in the ultimate crossover showdown. It's a tag team battle royale where anything goes. It's not complicated. You just have to assemble a dream team of 3 characters and unleash chaos in fast-paced one-on-one battles. But here's where it gets wild. You can tag in your teammates at any moment, adding a whole new layer of strategy to the mix. Plus, you've got this awesome variable assist mechanic where off-screen allies jump in to deliver devastating special moves. And don't forget about those hyper combos. Unleash these powerful attacks to turn the tide of battle in your favor. Now let's talk about how Marvel vs. Capcom 2 pushed the boundaries of gaming back in 2000. This game was a visual masterpiece that presented traditional 2D animated sprites along with mind-blowing 3D backgrounds and effects. It was the first in the franchise to feature 2.5D graphics, setting a whole new standard for fighting games at the time. Critics couldn't get enough of it, praising its frantic gameplay, massive character roster, and attractive visuals. Despite initial skepticism, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 became a commercial and critical success, cementing its place as one of the greatest fighting games of all time. Street Fighter III Third Strike. Step into the world of Street Fighter III Third Strike, where you have to fight for the future. It's 1999 and Capcom's back with another knockout fighting game. This time, they're bringing back the iconic Chun-Li and introducing 4 new fighters, each with their own story and motives. So, in Third Strike, you've got a stacked roster of 19 characters, including classics like Ryu and Ken, and newcomers like Makoto and Q. Plus, they've added some slick new mechanics like guard parry and a grade-based judgment system to keep things fresh. And don't forget about those epic one-on-one battles, where you can unleash devastating combos and super moves to dominate your opponent. Now, let's shift our focus to the real thing. How did this game manage to push arcade hardware to its limits in '99? Running on the CP System 3 hardware, this game was a visual marvel, with stunning 2D sprites and super colorful and vibrant backgrounds that brought the characters to life. Plus, with the addition of Chun-Li and the new fighters, they expanded the character roster, making the game even more and more epic. Critics may not have fully appreciated it at the time, but Street Fighter III Third Strike has since been recognized as one of the greatest fighting games of all time. And with its recent release on modern platforms like PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade, a whole new generation of gamers can now experience the thrill of the fight. But can I be honest? The arcade just hit differently. Terminator 2, the arcade game. Last but not least, we have Terminator 2, where you're going headfirst into the chaotic world of the Terminator, just like in the movie. You play as the iconic T-800 Terminator, on a mission to save John and Sarah Connor from the relentless T-1000. Coming to the gameplay, you're armed to the teeth, blasting away enemies in 7 heart-pounding stages. The action kicks off in 2029, where you're battling alongside the resistance against Skynet. Then it's back to the 90s to protect John from the T-1000. From crossing battlefields to facing off against hunter-killer aircraft, every moment is a fight for survival. Now, here's where things get really cool. Terminator 2 pushed the limits of arcade hardware back in '91 with its photorealistic digitized graphics and intense first-person perspective. It felt like you were right in the middle of the action. Plus, the game followed the movie's plot closely, with actors from the film lending their voices and likenesses to the game. The game was a smash hit in arcades, topping charts and earning praise for its graphics and gameplay. And when it made its way to home consoles, like the SNES, it still held up, with graphics that closely matched the arcade version. And there you have it, folks. 20 arcade games that didn't just entertain, but also pushed the envelope of gaming technology to its limits. From the hyper-realistic graphics of Terminator 2 to the groundbreaking gameplay mechanics of Street Fighter III Third Strike, these games blaze a trail for the future of gaming. So, the next time you step into an arcade or fire up a retro console, take a moment to marvel at the incredible advancements and unforgettable experiences that these games brought to the table. Remember to smash that button, drop a comment below so we know which one you like the best from today's list. Oh, and hit subscribe so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for more exciting content. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.